Hi, I'm Troy from Studio 33 Guitar. Thanks for watching. Today we're looking at how to play Back in Black by ACDC. Back in Black is one of the most iconic classic rock songs of all time. It's a lot of fun to play and it's instantly recognizable. Now, if you're a beginner, you'll definitely be able to play some of this song because it does have some simple chords, but there are some trickier parts as well, but I'll try and break that down and make it as simple as we can. This video is part of a series of videos on AC/DC style playing and songs, so make sure you check out the playlist. I'll put a link for it in the description below. You can click on that, it'll show you all the videos on AC/DC style songs and how to sound like AC/DC. And that playlist will be updated regularly, so make sure you check back and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. And as always, you can also download a free PDF chord chart and lyric sheet to help follow along. You can get that on my website, studio33guitar.com. But for now, let's zoom in on the neck and take a look at how to play Back in Black. The song starts with the intro that you heard me play at the beginning of this video, and this is really around three main chords. So let's have a look at those chords first, and then we'll look at the riffs that go in between them. So the first chord that we need is an E power chord. Now again, I recently did a video called the 6 chords of AC/DC. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. You can check that out and go through all of these chords plus some other ones that you can play for AC/DC songs. But this E power chord is going to be with the open E string, and then our index finger is going to go right here on the 2nd fret of the next string down. And all we really need are those 2 notes. Now you can also bar that index finger a little bit more and get this next string note, and that's going to be another E note. So you'd have 3 notes, and that would sound like that together. So you can decide if you want to try and get all 3 of those notes or just those 2 is fine as well. So that E chord is just hit 1 time before we go to the next chord. Now after you hit it, you want to mute it out right away. Now that involves using both your right hand and your left hand. So what I typically do is I'll use my right hand to rest against the strings, and then with my left hand, my fretting hand, I'll also just lift off slightly with my index finger so I'm not fretting that note anymore, and then I'll use the rest of my fingers to come down and rest on the strings to keep it from ringing. So if you watch my hands, you'll notice how both of them come together to stop the strings from ringing. So that again sounds like this. And that dead space after the chord is really important. So that's a technique that you want to work on. Now the next chord that we're going to play is a D chord. Now this is going to look like a regular D major chord, but we're not going to play the note that our middle finger is normally on this high string. We're only going to play the 2 notes where our index finger and ring finger are, along with the open D string. So those 3 notes together would sound like this. For that chord, we're going to hit it 3 times, and we're going to do a strum. We're going to go down, up, down. So that's going to look like this. And again, we're going to use our hand to mute out the strings after we play it and just lightly lift off with our fretting fingers to keep those notes from ringing out. So those 2 notes together would be like this. And next we're going to go to an A power chord. So for that, it's going to look just like that E power chord that we played, but we're just going to move our finger down 1 string. So now we have the open A string, and then this note with our index finger. And again, you can bar again to get this high note here, but you don't have to get that as long as you get these 2 notes. And that one also has a down, up, down strum, just like that D chord. So that'll be like this. And again, we're going to mute those strings out afterwards. So all 3 of those chords together would look like this. And next we're going to play the first little riff that he plays, and that looks like this. So that's going to start with the 3rd fret on the high E string, and I usually use my middle finger to play this. And we're going to do a pull-off for this. Now you can pick every note if you want to, but it's a little bit harder to do, and the pull-offs make it a little bit easier and a little bit smoother. So that's how I typically do it. So we're going to play that note, and then we're going to pull that finger off to make the open string sound. So that's going to be like this. So as we pull that off, we're not just lifting the finger off, we're actually pulling in a downward motion. So Typically what I do is sort of pivot on my thumb. So you have a bit of a turning motion like that. And then we're going to do the same thing on the next string up. Now this is a little bit trickier because this high E string is kind of in your way now, but you want to do that same kind of motion. And what I normally do there is I'll use my picking hand to just rest my fingers on this high E string so that it doesn't ring out if my finger accidentally hits it. So far those 4 notes would sound like this. After we play those notes, we're going to go to the next one, which is the 2nd fret of the G string. We're going to play that with the index finger because it's already kind of in that position after playing that last chord. And now we're going to play that note, we're going to give it a little bend, bring it back down, and then do that same trick to bring it to an open string. So that's going to be like this. So all those notes together slowly would sound like this. And together with those chords, that would sound like this. Now the second time we play those 3 chords, we're going to do a different riff at the end. And that's going to sound like this. And that starts with this B note on the 2nd fret. And that's the same note that we play when we play that E chord. And we're going to alternate between that note and some other notes up on the E string. So we're going to start with that B, and then we're going to play the 4th fret on the E string. Now I typically start this with my ring finger because I find that that reach is not too bad, but once we get up to these other notes, I switch to my pinky. So we're playing this B note, the 4th fret, back to that B note, to the 5th fret, back to the B note, to the 6th fret, back to the B note, to the 7th fret. So together that's like this. So with those chords slowly, that would sound like this. So that's how you play the intro and the verses of the song. Now let's look at the next section, which is more like a chorus. And that sounds like this. So this part starts out with that A chord again. And we're going to go from the A up to E. And then from there, we're going to go to a B chord. So the B chord starts with that index finger on the same note that we're already on for the E chord. And now what we're going to do is play this next note up here. Now I use my pinky for that because I feel like that's a good stretch. You can play it with your ring finger if you feel that that's a little more comfortable. Now typically what I also do is I will bar my pinky finger across these 2 strings, so we're getting 3 notes. So all 3 of those notes together sounds like this. So far we have this. Now what I also do is use my index finger just to nudge up against that low E string when we get to that B chord. So we'll play the E chord, that open string rings, and then to get it to stop once we shift to this B chord, I'll just move my index finger up just a little bit to touch that E string to keep it from ringing out. After we play that B chord, we're going to lift the index finger to get the A string to ring out, and we're going to leave our pinky finger where it is. And we're going to play that A string and then back down to the B chord. So that sounds like this. So all together, that would be like this. And you're going to play that sequence twice. And you'll notice at the end of each of those sequences, I was using my hands to push down on the strings to keep them from ringing, to cut those chords out. Now we're going to do a similar type of rhythm, but we're going to change chords, and that's going to sound like this. So that starts with a G chord. Now this is a G power chord. It looks very similar to a regular G major chord that you would play like on an acoustic guitar. But what we're going to do here is not include our index finger. So we have our third finger on this G note, and it's just going to lay a little bit flat to keep that next string from ringing out. Then the next two strings are going to ring open, and then we're going to have our ring finger on the third fret here of the B string, and then our pinky finger up here on the highest string at the third fret. So together that sounds like this. From there we're going to go to that D chord that we played earlier. So for this one you want to leave your ring finger right where it is and use that as a bit of a pivot point. And you're going to bring your index finger in now to that second fret, and that's going to be just like that D chord that we played earlier. So we have G to D. It's a fairly quick change, so you want to make sure that you don't lift that ring finger off. You want to make sure you keep it where it is so you can use it as a pivot point to go between those two chords. From there we're going to go to an A chord. So for that we're just going to move this index finger up one string and take the ring finger off, and now we have that A chord. It's the same one that we played earlier. And now we're just going to alternate between that A chord and this G note. We're not going to play the full G chord here. We're just going to go to this G note and back to A, like this. And we're going to give that G just a little bit of a bend before we go back to the A. Okay, so together that part goes like this. Now we're going to go back to that first set of chords that we did for this section. And now instead of going to those other chords, we're just going to go to this G chord, hit it once for a count of 4. So that's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to go to this D chord and we're going to hit it 3 times. And that's when he says back in black. And then from there we go back to the verse. So let's look at that whole section one more time slowly, starting with that A chord. So now we're back into the verse section, and that repeats exactly the same way as the first time through. Now once you play through that verse and then chorus and then back to verse and chorus, then that leads to the guitar solo section. Now I'm not going to show the actual solo in this video, but I can do that in another video if you'd like to learn that. Leave me a comment down below and let me know, and I'll look at doing that as well. But we are going to look at the rhythm section for the solo so you can play along with the song with a rhythm guitar. So that might sound a little bit harder than it actually is because it's not too bad. You're going to start with that same E power chord that we did at the intro and for the verse. And now we're going to reach up with our pinky finger to the 5th fret on the A string. That's a little bit of a stretch, but if you have one finger per fret, then that lines up your pinky finger exactly where it should be. And now we're going to play the open E string with that pinky note, like this. We're going to leave our index finger back where it was because it doesn't need to move. And then the next note we're going to play is with our ring finger right where it lands on the 4th fret. And again with the open E string. Now rhythm-wise, this is actually going to be identical to how we played the intro. So if you think about how you played the intro and the verse, you're going to play it the same way with this. So that makes it a little bit easier. It's played exactly the same way with your right hand as the intro and the verse. Now we get back to the E chord again, and we're going to play that like this. So from the beginning. Now again, I'm using my hands, my fingers in between those chords to mute them out, to cut them off. Now the second time, we're going to alternate between the E chord and the A chord, and that's going to be like this. So that's going to be E, A, E, A, E. And that last hit that we do with the E is the first hit of the new sequence. So altogether that would be like this. So you keep repeating that sequence all the way through the entire solo. And at the end of the solo, you go back to that chorus section. And that's played exactly the same way as it was before. And this next part of the song is probably the hardest part of the song. It's fairly quick and there's a lot of movement, but it's a lot of fun to play once you get it. If you slow it down, start really slow and build up your speed, eventually you'll be able to get it. Let's take a look. So we want to have our hands lined up similar to how we were in that last little solo section, with our index finger on that B note, and then have our other fingers ready to go on these other frets. So again, one finger per fret lines you up perfectly with where you need to be. Now if you're having trouble getting your fingers spread out that far, take a look at where your thumb is, because if your thumb is too high up on the neck here, it's really hard to stretch your fingers out. But if you bring your thumb down more towards the middle of the neck, you'll be able to stretch your fingers out a lot farther. So we're going to start this with the open E string, and then we're going to go to our pinky finger on the A string, and we're going to walk down pinky, ring, index, back to ring. So that's going to look like this. Now with your picking hand, you can either play that with all down strums, or you can play it alternating picking, which might be a little bit easier because it is fairly quick. After that ring finger note, we're going to play our middle finger note, but up on this G note up here. So that's going to look like this. And now we're going to do something that's very similar to that part that we did at the beginning. We're going to alternate between the B note and these notes up on the high string, but we're going to skip over the 4th fret here. We're going to go right to the pinky finger. And we repeat that sequence, and then we do exactly the same pattern, but now we're going to move it up to the open A string and move your fingers down one more string. And you're going to play exactly the same way. And then back to the E. And at the end of that, it goes back to that same chorus section that we played earlier. And you play that whole sequence again. And at the very end of the song, there's another guitar solo which follows the same rhythm pattern that we played in the first solo. If you like ACDC, then make sure you check out some of the other ACDC videos that I have on my channel. I'll put the playlist down below so you can click on that and go straight to it. Also, make sure you check out this backing track that I've created. You can use that to practice your chords or to practice your soloing along to it. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.